When my fiancé's wealthy mother saw my face, she was so shocked that she broke a glass and shouted that our engagement was off because I'm his biological sister. I'd spent 3 weeks picking out the dress, kept going back to the store, trying it on, putting it back. Daniel told me his mom could be tough at first. Old money, he said, laughing a little when he said it. She just needs time to warm up. So I wanted to be right. I wanted to be someone she couldn't find a reason to dismiss. I brought wine. I practiced her name. I told myself I was ready. The moment Eleanor Whitmore turned from the window and looked at my face, the glass slipped out of her hand. Just gone. It hit the marble floor, and the red wine spread across the white stone, and nobody moved. Not her. Not Daniel. Not the housekeeper standing 6 feet away. Because Eleanor's face had done something I had never seen a face do before. It went completely blank, like someone switched a light off behind her eyes. And then she pointed at me. "You need to leave," she said, barely above a whisper. "Both of you." Daniel laughed, that nervous laugh he does when he doesn't know what else to do.
This illustrates a classic defense mechanism where the brain utilizes nervous laughter to mitigate acute psychological stress and reject an overwhelming reality.
"Mom, what?" "This engagement is over." Still not looking at him, just at me. "You cannot marry this girl. You cannot marry her because she is your sister." The room went still. I know what that sounds like. And standing there with a wine bottle in my hands and Daniel's hand frozen on my back, my brain just refused. This is a mistake. She's confused. She's cruel and she's controlling, and this is how she gets rid of people Daniel brings home. But I couldn't explain away the terror on her face. And the terror was specifically, precisely about mine. Daniel got me out of there in minutes. In the car, he kept saying she was wrong. She'd always been like this. She would say anything to control him. I let him talk. I sat there, and I thought about something I had never told him. I was adopted, left at an agency as an infant. No name, no note, nothing. I had spent my whole life quietly trying to figure out where I came from, searching faces in crowds for something familiar, never finding it. Until that moment in that dining room when a woman who had never met me looked at my face and dropped her glass. She called me 3 days later. Not Daniel. Me. On a number I had never given her. She asked me to come alone. I went. Private room in a restaurant so far outside my world, I felt it the second I walked through the door. Eleanor was already there. Back straight, hands folded, every trace of that terror locked up somewhere I couldn't see. She didn't offer me anything. She slid an envelope across the table. $1 million, she said, through my attorney, privately. There would be no record connecting it to this conversation. All I ask is that you leave Daniel's life. Tell him whatever you need to tell him. Just go. I looked at the envelope. I looked at her. Tell me why first. She glanced at her hands, just for a second, then back up. Because if this comes out, there is no version where anyone walks away okay, including you. Is he actually my brother? Silence. Then tell me what you know, I said, and I'll consider your offer. She was quiet long enough that I could hear the muffled noise of the restaurant behind the closed door. Other people. Normal lives. 26 years ago, she said, I made choices I have spent every day since trying to contain. There was someone. It lasted 8 months. It ended. Then I found out he had a daughter that couldn't be kept. I told myself it wasn't mine to know about. I had a husband, a son, a life I wasn't willing to blow up. She looked straight at me when she said the last part. You've been looking at me this whole conversation like you already know, I said. She didn't deny it. I stood up, left the envelope on the table, walked out into the cold and stood on the sidewalk, not really going anywhere, just trying to breathe. She thought I was going to disappear. She did not know me at all. I got her hair off a jacket she left on a chair at a coffee meeting I'd engineered. Sent both samples to a private lab under a name that wasn't mine, paid cash, told myself whatever came back, I could handle it. The results came in 10 days, 2 in the morning, lights low, hands not quite steady, 99.8%. Maternal match. I put my phone face down and sat in the dark and didn't move for a long time. Then I cried. Not the kind where you know exactly why. The kind that just keeps going, and somewhere in the middle of it, you catch a thought you can't shake loose. She knew. She sat across that table and pushed that envelope at me, and she knew she was my mother. And she didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't say, "I've wondered about you." She said $1 million and waited to see if I'd disappear.
This is a case of extreme compartmentalization, where an individual reduces an emotional crisis to a financial transaction to protect their social identity.
But here's what I couldn't let go of. Daniel looked nothing like her. I had gone back through every photo I could find. Him at 5, at 10, at 16, and put them next to pictures of Eleanor and Robert at the same ages. Nothing connected. Not his jaw. Not his eyes. Not the way he holds his shoulders. He didn't look like either of them. So I kept digging. It took 3 weeks to find the storage unit. I won't walk through every step. None of that matters. What matters is the folder inside a sealed box, buried under old financial records I almost didn't move. International adoption certificate, birth records from overseas, medical clearance documents. And tucked behind all of it, an unsealed envelope with Robert's name on the front and Eleanor's handwriting inside. It had never been sent. I read it standing under the one bare bulb in that unit, and by the time I got to the end, I sat down right there on the concrete floor. Didn't even think about how dirty it was. She had written it the year before the adoption. 4 lost pregnancies. Doctors who told her it wasn't going to happen. She wrote about this baby boy overseas with a tenderness I had never once seen on her face. She called him her miracle. She asked Robert to love him as his own. Then behind the letter, a second document. A private medical assessment, dated 8 months after the adoption was finalized. Eleanor had gotten pregnant. Naturally, against everything the doctors had said. But the baby wasn't Robert's. She had ended the affair, buried it. And 9 months later, a baby girl had been handed to an agency with no name and no note. Daniel was always the chosen one, the boy she had crossed an ocean for, the child she'd fought to bring home. But he was not her blood. I was. I sat on that floor until I could stand up again. Then I put everything back exactly as I found it, walked to my car, and drove home. I had a party to get ready for. They had rented an entire ballroom. 25 years, and Eleanor had controlled every detail. The flowers, the lighting, the string quartet in the corner, the champagne that cost more per bottle than I made in a week. Robert stood near the entrance, shaking hands and laughing, warm and easy the way Daniel is warm and easy. And every time I looked at him that night, something pulled in my chest. He had raised a son who wasn't biologically his and loved him without reservation. And the woman beside him in the gown that matched her eyes had spent 25 years making sure he never found out why. Daniel was next to me all night, squeezing my hand, whispering that everything was going to be fine. He had been quietly working on his father for 2 weeks, trying to soften things. He trusted me completely, and I couldn't tell him what I was about to do, because if I had, he would have stopped me. Not out of loyalty to Eleanor, but out of love for Robert. He would have said, "Not here. Not like this. There has to be another way." He wasn't wrong. But Eleanor had sat across a restaurant table and chosen the envelope. So I chose the microphone. I walked to the small stage and asked for a moment. People quieted down the way they do when they assume a toast is coming. I saw Eleanor register what was happening about 2 seconds before I started talking. Her face did the thing again. That light, going out. I didn't raise my voice. I laid the folder on the table beside the mic and talked the way you talk when you're trying not to fall apart. 26 years ago, I said, your wife had an affair. She got pregnant. The baby wasn't her husband's, so she gave it away. No name, no note, nothing. That baby was me. I paused, let it land. And the son she raised as her own, Daniel. She adopted him overseas the year before when the doctors said she couldn't have children. Robert never knew about any of it. The room didn't go silent. That's the thing about these moments in real life. They're messier than that. There were voices, someone near the back said something loud. A woman grabbed the arm of the man next to her. Eleanor took one step toward the stage, and Robert put his hand out flat, not even looking at her. And she stopped, like he was holding a door shut. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he walked to the table, picked up the folder, opened it. Eleanor stood in the middle of her anniversary party in her perfect gown and watched her husband read the truth for the first time in 25 years. He didn't speak for a long time. The room got very quiet on its own. Then he looked up at her. "How long?" he said. Just that. 2 words. She didn't answer.
This demonstrates total ego paralysis. When a long-term, meticulously maintained false narrative collapses instantly, the individual's psychological defense mechanisms completely freeze.
That was the most devastating thing in the room. The divorce took 8 months. Robert's lawyers were thorough, and once Eleanor's secrets started unraveling, other things came with them. Redirected accounts, financial arrangements that added up to a pattern nobody had examined closely before. I won't pretend I felt like justice had happened. I felt exhausted, and sad in a way I hadn't expected. For a woman who had been given 2 chances to claim her daughter and chose her reputation both times. Daniel took time to come back to himself. We had a lot of nights that first year where we just sat together and didn't say much, both of us putting the story of who we were back together from pieces that didn't fit the way we thought. But here's what I kept coming back to. Daniel had always been chosen. Eleanor had crossed an ocean and picked him. Whatever else she was, that part was real. He had been wanted, deliberately and completely, in a way a lot of people never get to be. About 6 weeks after the divorce finalized, Robert called and asked if I'd meet him for coffee. Just the 2 of us. We sat at a place near his new apartment, and he wrapped his hands around his mug and said, "I know I have no claim on you. I know that. But I built my whole life around this family, and it turns out the family is different than I thought. But I'm not sure I want less of it. If that makes any sense." I told him it made complete sense. We got married in the spring. Robert walked me down the aisle. He cried before I did. The inheritance passed to Daniel and me equally. Robert arranged it without being asked, and without being thanked, because he waved it off before I could get the words out. I have a photo on my desk from that day. Daniel laughing at something off camera. Robert with his arm around me. April light coming through the windows. Eleanor had offered me $1 million to vanish. Instead, she handed me everything she had spent her life building. And she wasn't there to see any of it. She thought she'd closed every door, but she'd left me.
Could you forgive a mother who offered you $1 million just to vanish? Let's talk in the comments.